They are in such serious trouble. So one thing they do know, though, is that Kamala Harris has to go. Kamala Harris cannot be the person who runs in 2024. So this brings us to CNN's hit piece. And now, I don't think that CNN runs pretty much anything without someone from the White House being behind it. I just don't think that's the way CNN operates. CNN is an adjunct wing of the Democratic press spokesperson, essentially. So there's a piece there by Edward Isaac Dovere and Jasmine Wright. It is titled Exasperation and Dysfunction Inside Kamala Harris's Frustrating Start as Vice President. Oh, it's going to be good, guys. Do you see how the turnabout is fair play here? Everybody was thinking, man, I was not ready for this surprise ending. You know, everybody thought that when Joe Biden picked Kamala Harris, he would need a food taster because he wouldn't want to stand. You wouldn't want Joe Biden standing at the top of the stairs of Air Force One and Kamala Harris standing anywhere within like a 3-foot radius, right? Because just one slip and Kamala Harris is president. Well, what if it turns out that Joe Biden has put out the preemptive political hit on Kamala Harris? Wouldn't that be kind of glorious and hilarious? Well, that may be what's happening. And yeah, I'm here for it. It's enjoyable. Worn out by what they see as entrenched dysfunction and lack of focus, key West Wing aides have largely thrown up their hands at Vice President Kamala Harris and her staff, deciding there simply isn't time to deal with them right now, especially at a moment when President Joe Biden faces quickly multiplying legislative and political concerns. The exasperation runs both ways. Interviews with nearly 36 former and current Harris aides, administration officials, Democratic operatives, donors, and outside advisors who spoke extensively to CNN reveal a complex reality inside the White House. Many in the vice president's circle fume she's not being adequately prepared or positioned and is instead being sidelined. And the VP herself has told several confidants she feels constrained in what she's able to do politically. Yeah, they keep saying every time you go out and get in front of a camera, you look like an idiot. Those around her remain wary of even hinting at future political ambitions, with Biden's team highly attuned to signs of disloyalty, particularly from the vice president. She's a heartbeat away from the presidency now. She could be just a year away from launching a presidential campaign of her own, given doubts throughout the political world that Biden will actually go through with a re-election bid in 2024, something he's pledged to do both publicly and privately. Yeah, here's the other thing. Joe Biden doesn't want Kamala Harris around because he sees her as a threat. And old Joe still has the idea that he's going to run for re-election. And by run, I mean hobble toward re-election. Few of the insiders who spoke with CNN think she's being well prepared for whichever role it will be. By the way, you shouldn't have to well prepare the VP. I thought the entire idea was that the VP is ready day one in case, God forbid, the president goes down. I'm sorry, this is not a tutoring class. You don't get like remedial vice presidenting once you become vice president of the United States. You should not be selecting somebody for vice president of the, I mean, this is Joe Biden's fault, honestly. You shouldn't be selecting somebody for vice president who needs like remedial math. Okay, this is not you went to high school and then they just kept passing you through and then finally you graduated like 57th in your class of 75. And then you get to community college and Jill's there teaching you how to do 2 + 2 = 4. That's not what the VP slot is supposed to be here. Few of the insiders who spoke with CNN think she's being well prepared for whichever role it will be. Again, I love the image of just Kamala Harris sitting there and somebody standing in front of a blackboard explaining to her what the VP role is and how she's going to fulfill it. Harris is struggling with a rocky relationship with some parts of the White House, while longtime supporters feel abandoned and see no coherent public sense of what she's done or been trying to do as vice president. Being the first woman and the first woman of color in national elected office is historic, but has also come with outside scrutiny and no forgiveness for even small errors, as she will often point out. By the way, always a great look. It doesn't look peevish or whiny at all to sit around as vice president of the United States talking about how everybody's mean to you. Oh, it's so sad. I mean, she doesn't get any forgiveness for small errors. Now, small errors like saying that she's been to the border when she hasn't been to the border ever and not understanding why she should go to the border, for example, or being charged with getting COVID under control and then completely failing at that. Literally everything she's tasked with, she fails at. Defenders and people who care for Harris are getting frantic, says CNN. Remember, this is CNN. This is not Fox News. This is coming directly from Biden. Okay, there's only one way that this piece gets run, and that is the White House is looking out there and they are saying she needs to go. Get rid of her now. We need another shot at this. Defenders and people who care for Harris are getting frantic. When they're annoyed, some pass around a recent Onion story mocking her lack of more substantive work. One with the headline, White House urges Kamala Harris to sit at computer all day in case emails come through. When they're depressed, they bat down the Aaron Sorkin-style rumor that Biden might try to replace her by nominating her to a Supreme Court vacancy. That chatter has already reached top levels of the Biden orbit, according to one person who's heard it. Oh yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. Nominating Kamala Harris to the Supreme Court of the United States based on her extensive experience being terrible at everything. Man, talk about just failing upward. This would be the greatest example of failing upward I've ever seen. She fails as AG in California. By the way, pushing the totally unconstitutional and ridiculous notion that the AG of a state can simply refuse to defend a law in a given state, and then courts can simply refuse to adjudicate the law. This is what she did with Proposition 8. She said, I'm an AG of the state. I don't like traditional marriage. The voters in my state like traditional marriage. I don't. I refuse to challenge those. I refuse to stand up for that law in court. And then the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals is like, well, if the state of California isn't standing up for its own law, I guess we won't even adjudicate it. Just ridiculous on its face. She was a garbage AG. She was a garbage senator. This is when I was in California, so I know. And now she's a garbage VP. And now they're like, what if we put her on the Supreme Court? Are you going to just, if she keeps failing, will she eventually become a deity? Like, seriously, we all have to sacrifice to Kamala Harris? We throw virgins into volcanoes for Kamala Harris if she keeps failing this way? We'll just keep moving her up the food chain until we all genuflect at the actual altar of Kamala Harris based on her sucking at her job royally? It's unbelievable. By the way, apparently this is like a thing in Democratic Party politics. Terry McAuliffe just lost his Virginia governor's race, which is nearly impossible to do. You know how hard you have to work as a Democrat to lose a Virginia gubernatorial race? You have to work super hard at it. And I'll say this for Terry McAuliffe. He worked super hard at losing. That dude was dedicated to losing. He lost to Glenn Youngkin. First thing that happened, the Biden administration came around knocking on his door saying, do you want to be in the Biden administration? Like, the failure upward is just astonishing. I mean, Joe Biden is a great story of this, right? Joe Biden ran for president 173 times. He's been running for president since William Jennings Bryan was challenging him in primaries. And now Joe Biden is president of the United States. You can just keep failing upward, presumably. According to CNN, Harris is perceived to be in such a weak position that top Democrats in and outside of Washington have begun to speculate privately, asking each other why the White House has allowed her to become so hobbled in the public consciousness, at least as they see it. Again, I love that her own failings are now Joe Biden's fault. Joe Biden is a doddering old fool. And the Biden team's like, why can't he help her? And Joe's like, and then he falls over and clonks his head. And we'll continue on this because it's glorious. It really is. Talk about dysfunctional. Okay, as I've said before, when it comes to politics, folks, understand, politics is never House of Cards. It is always Veep. It is never House of Cards. It is always Veep. It is a bunch of morons running around like chickens with their head cut off directly into walls until they knock themselves unconscious and then tax you. That is what American politics is. And politics of nearly every sort. All right, so CNN's story, this hit piece on Kamala Harris continues. Quote, she's very honored and very proud to be Vice President of the United States. Her job as the number 2 is to be helpful and supportive to the president and to take on work that he asks her to take on, said Eleni Kounalakis, the Lieutenant Governor of California, a longtime friend. Kounalakis spoke with the VP last Monday morning before Harris departed for a diplomatic mission to France. It is natural that those of us who know her know how much more helpful she can be than she is currently being asked to be, said Kounalakis. That's where the frustration is coming from. An incumbent vice president, says CNN, should be a shoo-in the next time the party's presidential nomination is open. But guessing who might launch a theoretical primary challenge to Harris has become an ongoing insider parlor game. Other politicians with their own presidential ambitions have started privately acknowledging they're trying to figure out how to quietly lay the groundwork to run if and when Harris falters, as they think she might. The reality is more complex and looks different to people more familiar with how any White House actually works. Harris is the first VP in decades to come into office with less Washington experience than the president. Finding her footing was always going to be hard. Oh, so sad. Presidents and vice presidents and their staffs often clash. Barack Obama's West Wing tended to be dismissive of Biden's staffers, and Biden himself had a number of stumbles early in that job. Republicans and right-wing media turned Harris into a political target from the moment she was picked for the ticket. An implicit racism and sexism have been constant. It's not that she sucks at her job. It's racism and sexism. That's the solution. And by the way, Joe Biden picked her for racism and sexism. Why he picked her? Openly. I need a black woman for the job, he said, and thus he picked a black woman. I don't know who's being the racist and the sexist other than the guy who literally said he's selecting on the basis of race and sex. But, says CNN, it's a conundrum unique to her. People are expecting their historic vice president to make history every day, when in fact she's trying to carry the duties of a secondary role. Harris is being judged, not just by how she's doing in the traditional duties of a vice president, said Minion Moore, a longtime Democratic operative who's become Harris's most important outside advisor. It's a little more subliminal, but it's real. What's her playbook in history, said Moore. Harris has emerged as a quiet force in the administration, said Moore. Oh, is that? And she focuses attention on different issues, sometimes just by her very presence in the room. Oh, that's a good way of putting stand in the corner and say nothing and wear the dunce cap, please. She's a quiet force in the administration. That's amazing. You know, this Kleenex box right here, it's a quiet force on my show. It's been sitting right here on the table this whole time, doing pretty much nothing. But, you know, really, this Kleenex box right here, I think it's been having a marked impact on the quality of the show. It doesn't have to have any Kleenex in it, by the way. I think it's empty. I think we need a new Kleenex box. But it's a quiet force. It focuses attention on different issues just by its very presence in the room. Love it. Love it. That is a hot take right there from Minion Moore. Her quiet presence in the room, just standing there like a thing. I love this too. It's so good. Okay, the story just gets better from CNN. With many sources speaking on condition of anonymity to discuss the situation more frankly, they all tell roughly the same story. Harris's staff has repeatedly failed her and left her exposed. Stalin has never failed. Only Stalin's staff has failed him. To the Lubyanka with you. Yes. Harris cannot fail. Harris can only be failed. Even some who have been asked for advice lament Harris's overly cautious tendencies and staff problems, which have been a feature of every office she's held, from San Francisco DA to U.S. Senate. CNN continues, Biden aimed to model his relationship with Harris on his own vice presidency and directed aides early in his presidency to employ her in similar fashion. He arranged weekly lunches, just as he'd held with Obama, and invited Harris to join him for his morning classified intelligence briefing. Harris, meanwhile, threw herself into proving her commitment to the president and the administration, using his relationship with Obama as her guide. Even then, some White House aides questioned whether Biden's experience as VP would easily translate to someone with far different qualifications and skills, and to a much different moment. After Harris became known in the first few months for often standing by Biden's side in the frame as he made big speeches, even after she'd introduced him herself, the West Wing appears to have overcorrected, so she's been with the president noticeably less, not just in public. A week and a half ago, as Biden and his aides and multiple outside allies rattled through calls all day, trying to lock down wavering lawmakers ahead of the House infrastructure vote, Harris spent the afternoon touring a NASA Space Flight Center in suburban Maryland. We weren't going to cancel her schedule just because of the House's foolishness, a Harris aide explained. Alternatively, the White House was like, yeah, we don't need you in the room making calls to people. If you'd like to go see the spaceships and the nice telescope, and we can hire some kids so they look excited. That happened. They literally hired children to be in the room with her. That's how popular she is. That's exciting stuff. They're like, that was reported. So good times over there with Kamala Harris. The next morning, Biden singled her out, saying, a lot of this has to do with the lady right here, the vice president. But that's not how things had played out. No, indeed, it is not. So apparently, Joe Biden had basically shuffled her off to NASA to hang out with the children. And then he brought her back and he's like, she contributed a lot. She really helped me out. But, says CNN, that's not exactly how things had played out. While she had attended some meetings Biden hosted with key lawmakers, there were many more she didn't attend. To the point it was noteworthy, she made an unscheduled drop by one session in the final stretch. Harris had only been in Washington 4 years, to the White House just one time before being sworn in as VP. So, in other words, she didn't know any of the senators, and no one cared about her, and no one liked her. So sending her to the Hill was completely pointless. Harris's aides cite how much of what's in the infrastructure bill connects back to legislation she worked on well in the Senate, including accessible broadband, wildfire defense, water cleanup, and clean energy school buses. Ooh, school buses. Perhaps one Harris aide offered. The issue is that some in the West Wing don't have constant knowledge of what the VP's team is doing. We feel like a central component of the effort overall, another said. Harris has also complained to confidants about not being a greater part of the president's approach to the Afghanistan withdrawal, despite telling CNN at the time she was the last one in the room when he made the decision, leaving her without more to draw on when she defended him publicly. Wait, so she's so politically incompetent she wanted to be closer to the center of the Afghanistan withdrawal? That is something like that line right there tells you everything you need to know about Kamala Harris's political instincts. Joe Biden destroyed his presidency on the shoals of Afghanistan. He decided to precipitously withdraw from Afghanistan, leave hundreds of American citizens behind, leave tens of thousands of SIV holders behind, leave 19 million women to the predations of the Taliban. And Kamala Harris is like, why can't I be in the room for that? Why can't I be at the center of that? Man, this lady has the political instincts of a badger trying to cross the I-5. Like, very bright. When Biden picked Harris as his running mate, he was essentially anointing her as the future of the Democratic Party, says CNN. Now many of those close to her feel like he's shirking his political duties to promote her, essentially setting her up to fail. Her fans are panicked. By her fans, we mean her and Doug Emhoff again, watching her poll numbers sink even lower than Biden's, worrying that even the base Democratic vote is starting to give up on her. Says a top donor to Biden and other Democrats, quote, Kamala Harris is a leader, but is not being put in positions to lead. That doesn't make sense. We need to be thinking long term. We need to be doing what's best for the party. You should be putting her in positions to succeed. On the one issue Harris is actually asked to be assigned voting rights, progress has been slow because Biden is focused on passing his own domestic agenda. even though Harris has said privately the filibuster must be scaled back if real progress can be achieved. And though Harris has told Confidence she's been enjoying a good working dynamic directly with Biden, those who work for them describe their relationship in terms of settling into an exhausted stalemate. Suspicion, says CNN, has sprouted out of bitterness. Last month, White House aides leapt to the defense of Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Harris loyalists tell CNN they see in that yet another example of the unfair standard at play, wondering why she didn't get similar cover any of the times she's been attacked by the right. It's hard to miss the specific energy the White House brings to defend a white man, knowing that Kamala Harris has spent almost a year taking a lot of the hits the West Wing didn't want to take themselves, said a former Harris aide. So now it's going to be so much fun, guys, because Buttigieg is going to run against her, and it's going to be Kamala Harris being like, you only like Buttigieg because he's white. And Buttigieg is going to be like, you only like Kamala Harris because she's straight. It's going to be intersectional joy all the way down. It's going to be lots of fun. White House aides said they weren't pitting one against the other. The difference in the responses, those aides think, was that Buttigieg hadn't done anything wrong. Buttigieg's leave was a conveniently timed reminder that Biden is pushing for a national paid leave law. That's different from when Harris has created problems for herself, White House aides believe, such as when she didn't push back on a student who accused Israel of ethnic genocide. West Wing aides weren't going to clean up after that. But even when White House has faced her own manufactured outrage from the right, like when an innocuous tweet about enjoying the long Memorial Day weekend was said to be insulting dead veterans, White House aides also remained virtually silent. And then CNN continues along these lines. Harris's team is mad Biden assigned her to handle diplomatic relations with the Northern Triangle nations in the hopes of addressing root causes of migration, but gave her no role on the southern border itself. As CNN has previously reported, Harris herself has said she didn't want to be assigned to manage the border, aware that it was a no-win political situation that would only sandbag her in the future. But Biden's team was annoyed that Harris kept fumbling answers about the border. As some around Harris see it, the White House failed to come to her defense. Biden aides have repeatedly told Harris aides they'd love to have her doing more, and asked the VP's office to come up with plans for how to get her involved, according to people familiar with the conversations. Though the staffs are on multiple calls per week, West Wing aides are often left wondering why there's not more follow-through. Aware of her stumblings and the ticking political clock, Harris's chief of staff, Tina Florida, went to Ron Klain over the summer. They were drowning and they needed more help. Klain is known as a Kamala Harris defender in the West Wing. This is the chief of staff, and does a weekly one-on-one meeting with her in the West Wing office to help her strategize. As a former chief of staff to two VPs, Klain knows the dynamics well. Klain, in a statement provided to CNN, downplayed any criticism of the VP, saying Harris and her team are, quote, off to the fastest and strongest start of any VP I have seen. Harris's aides point that Biden was never subjected to the kind of attacks she regularly endures or to a toxic social media culture. And then they say it's because she's too loyal to Biden. That's the big problem. She is too loyal to Biden. And then she starts blaming her aides. In and around Harris's circle, they speculate there must be someone getting in her way. Some think it's the president himself, leaving her out in the cold. Some blame specific West Wing aides whom they feel sure are out to undercut her. Some fear the vice president is leaning heavily on her sister Maya, brother-in-law Tony West, and niece Mina Harris, whom they sense exerting influence over everything from staff hires to political decisions. Several people familiar with the operations of the VP say that after a spike in involvement earlier in the year, the family has now been pushed further out again recently. If you expect that to remain the case. So again, she's blaming her operation. You have everybody in the White House blaming her. You have her falling apart on the public stage. And she's just falling apart. She's falling apart. Donna Brazile, one of several prominent black women who urged Biden advisors to put Harris on the ticket, agreed that it's time to retool after a rough first year. Brazile wants to see the VP on the road almost constantly. Keep Air Force 2 gassed up and ready to go, she joked, whether talking about replacing lead pipes in Flint or expanding broadband in rural America. She's a wonderful messenger, but it has to be clear, concise, and consistent, said Brazile. Don't make her a creature of the Beltway. Let her out. Yeah, that's the issue, is that we haven't seen enough of Kamala Harris. So here's the funny part. The Biden administration is desperately trying to downplay this. How do we know? So Jen Psaki, who is back from her COVID bout, she was fine. She tweeted out, there's a direct quote, "For anyone who needs to hear it, VP is not only a vital partner to POTUS, but a bold leader who has taken on key, important challenges facing the country, from voting rights to addressing root causes of migration to expanding broadband." Oh, yes. There's that energy. Gotta love that energy. We are so happy we picked up that Blaine Gabbert to be our backup quarterback now that Tom Brady is injured. This is going to go just great. We love her. We love her. Yeah, things are going great over here. Blaine Gabbert will we're not going to pick up anyone from the waiver wire. Blaine Gabbert is definitely going to be our longtime starting quarterback. Yeah. Jen Psaki really trying to tweet through it. Ron Klain doing the same thing. So Ron Klain, chief of staff, he just retweeted something from a person named Robert Garcia. Our VP, Kamala Harris, just finished a highly successful trip where she strengthened diplomatic relationships. She takes on the most complex assignment because she's capable and smart. She's a great leader who also happens to be funny and kind. And that's the tweet. And Ronald Klain retweeted that. So Team Biden is like, okay, we're going to pretend that we like her. Yeah, we hate her. We're going to pretend. Okay, sure. So the fact that Kamala Harris is in a complete state of implosion, and that you have a giant, several thousand word long story at CNN about the complete implosion of Kamala Harris demonstrates the Democrats are in such serious trouble. They are in the biggest trouble right now, and they know it. I mean, they're in serious. How serious is the trouble the Democrats are in? According to a brand new ABC News Washington Post poll, Republican congressional candidates in the generic ballot currently hold their biggest lead in 40 years. In 4 decades. This is the biggest lead since before I was born in the congressional generic ballot. The Democratic Party's difficulties, according to ABC News, are deep. They include soaring economic discontent, a president who's fallen 12 percentage points underwater in job approval, and a broad sense the party is out of touch with the concerns of most Americans. 62% say so. And this is the worst number for the Democratic Party. They're down at 41% in the history of the poll. In the history of the poll. I hope you enjoyed that clip from The Ben Shapiro Show. If you did, go ahead and hit that subscribe button so you stay up to date with all our future content.